The announcement that France and Saudi Arabia have come together to host a historic conference on the two-state solution marks one of the most significant diplomatic developments in recent years. For decades, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has stood as one of the most entrenched disputes in international politics, and attempts at resolving it have been marked by failures, setbacks, and fleeting moments of progress. What makes this new initiative so notable is not only the high-profile nature of the hosts, but also the timing, the regional dynamics, and the global pressure that surrounds it. In this video, we'll explore what this conference represents, why it matters, and what it could mean for the prospects of peace in the Middle East. The first point to highlight is the symbolism of the joint sponsorship. France, a Western power with a long tradition of involvement in Middle Eastern diplomacy, and Saudi Arabia, the Arab world's most influential monarchy and custodian of Islam's holiest sites, together send a clear message. It is a rare moment when Western and Arab leadership converge so directly on such a divisive issue. France brings international legitimacy, connections to the European Union, and a permanent seat at the UN Security Council, while Saudi Arabia brings regional weight, financial influence, and a claim to speak for the broader Arab and Muslim world. This combination seeks to create a balanced platform where both Israelis and Palestinians, along with other stakeholders, could potentially engage without feeling the process is dominated by one side. Another crucial element is timing. The region has been gripped by cycles of violence, from the devastation in Gaza to flare-ups in the West Bank, to escalating tensions across the broader Middle East involving Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. The humanitarian situation in Gaza has intensified calls for an urgent political resolution, while the West Bank remains under deep strain from settlements, checkpoints, and economic stagnation. At the same time, normalization agreements between Israel and several Arab states have altered the diplomatic map. Saudi Arabia itself has been engaged in delicate talks over possible normalization with Israel, but Riyadh has consistently tied that step to progress on Palestinian statehood. Hosting this conference allows Saudi leaders to reaffirm that the Palestinian issue cannot be sidelined in pursuit of regional deals. France, on its side, has long maintained support for the two-state solution as the only viable path to peace. French presidents, from Jacques Chirac to Emmanuel Macron, have argued that without Palestinian sovereignty, lasting peace will elusive. elusive. Paris has often sought to present itself as an alternative voice to Washington's dominant role in Middle East diplomacy, emphasizing international law, multilateralism, and the legitimacy of Palestinian rights. By joining with Saudi Arabia, France positions itself as both a bridge to Europe and a partner capable of amplifying Arab concerns in a credible manner. The design of the conference also reflects a carefully crafted balance. According to early reports, the gathering will include representatives from the United Nations, the European Union, the Arab League, and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Invitations are expected to extend to both Israeli and Palestinian officials. though the level of participation remains uncertain given the current political climates. Beyond state actors, the conference aims to involve civil society groups, humanitarian organizations, and experts in security and economics. This wider net of participation reflects recognition that peace is not only a matter of government negotiations, but also of creating conditions on the ground that can support coexistence. One of the unique selling points of this initiative is the Saudi dimension. For decades, Saudi Arabia has positioned itself as a defender of the Palestinian cause, most famously through the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative, which offered Israel recognition from the Arab world in exchange for withdrawal to pre-1967 borders and a just solution for Palestinian refugees. That plan remains on the table, though largely ignored by successive Israeli governments. By co-hosting with France, Saudi leaders reaffirm their commitment to that framework while signaling flexibility in engaging new partners to advance it. At the same time, the kingdom's gradual reforms under Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have positioned it as a state seeking to redefine its global role, balancing modernization at home with ambitious diplomacy abroad. Supporting Palestinian statehood while working with Western allies enhances its legitimacy both regionally and internationally. For France, the unique appeal lies in showcasing its ability to act as a convener at a time when American diplomacy is seen as stalled or too closely aligned with Israeli positions. Paris has often been critical of Israeli settlement expansion and has voiced concern over the humanitarian situation in Gaza. At the same time, France maintains close ties with Israel and a strong Jewish community at home, which gives its diplomacy a balancing act of credibility. Co-hosting with Saudi Arabia gives France leverage and visibility in a region where it seeks to maintain relevance, despite increasing US-China competition. Performance in terms of practical outcomes will depend on whether the conference can move beyond symbolism to concrete commitments. Among the potential goals being discussed are a roadmap for renewed negotiations, a mechanism to monitor settlement activity, proposals for international guarantees on Palestinian statehood, and economic packages to support reconstruction and governance in Palestinian territories. The hope is to create momentum that can push past the current stalemate, even if direct Israeli-Palestinian negotiations remain elusive in the short term. The challenges are immense. Israel's current political landscape is dominated by hardline nationalist and religious parties who strongly oppose concessions on settlements or recognition of Palestinian sovereignty. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces internal divisions, judicial controversies, and growing international criticism, but has little incentive to shift course domestically. On the Palestinian side, leadership remains divided between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza, a division that has crippled negotiations for years. International players like the United States, Russia, China, and the EU each bring their own agendas, complicating consensus. Against this backdrop, even the most well-intentioned conference risks becoming another entry in a long list of failed initiatives. However, the conference's design elements reflect an attempt to learn from past failures. Instead of relying solely on bilateral talks between Israelis and Palestinians, the idea is to create an international umbrella that can provide pressure, incentives, and guarantees. By having Saudi Arabia as co-host, the Arab world is directly invested, reducing the perception that peace talks are Western-imposed. By having France as partner, the process connects to European support and broader international legitimacy. Including multilateral institutions ensures that humanitarian, economic, and legal dimensions are incorporated alongside security concerns. This layered approach seeks to provide a more durable foundation for eventual negotiations. Another dimension to consider is the geopolitical backdrop. Saudi Arabia has recently pursued reconciliation with Iran, brokered with China's help, signaling a shift in regional rivalries. This opens space for a broader regional dialogue on security and stability. Meanwhile, France, along with other European powers, has been grappling with the consequences of the Ukraine war, energy challenges, and global realignments. By stepping into Middle Eastern diplomacy, Paris not only reasserts influence, but also addresses European concerns about migration, terrorism, and energy security, all of which are tied to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict's instability. The conference also reflects a generational shift. Younger populations across the Arab world, including in Saudi Arabia, express frustration at the lack of progress on Palestine, but also demand practical solutions and improved living conditions. Similarly, younger Palestinians increasingly doubt the feasibility of a two-state solution, given the reality of settlements and territorial fragmentation. By creating a platform that addresses not only sovereignty, but also economic and humanitarian issues, the conference attempts to speak to these emerging constituencies who may otherwise turn away from diplomacy altogether. One must also highlight the role of international legitimacy. The two-state solution has long been enshrined in UN resolutions. Supported by the majority of the international community, yet eroded by realities on the ground. France and Saudi Arabia are essentially trying to revive that legitimacy and force the issue back onto the global agenda. For years, peace talks have been relegated to the sidelines, with international attention diverted to wars in Syria, Yemen, Ukraine, and now global tensions involving China and the United States. By organizing a high-profile gathering, Paris and Riyadh force leaders and media alike to refocus on the Palestinian question, underlining its centrality to broader Middle Eastern peace. In terms of unique appeal to a wide audience, the conference is being framed not merely as a political event, but as a historic attempt to reset the conversation. The optics of French and Saudi leaders sitting together, potentially alongside Palestinian and Israeli representatives, symbolize the possibility of unlikely partnerships in pursuit of peace. The inclusion of humanitarian organizations and economic experts underscores that this is not just about borders and sovereignty, but also about people as daily lives, from access to healthcare and education to freedom of movement and economic opportunity. By making the issue relatable on a human level, the conference hopes to generate broader public engagement rather than being seen as another closed-door elite negotiation. Critics, however, point out that symbolism alone cannot deliver results without the United States' direct involvement and without Israeli government willingness. Any declarations or roadmaps may remain unenforceable. Washington remains the only actor with real leverage over Israel, given its military aid, political backing, and diplomatic shield at the UN. While France and Saudi Arabia can provide moral and political weight, they cannot compel concessions on their own. Still, supporters argue that such a conference can build momentum, create pressure, and pave the way for Washington to re-engage on new terms. For Palestinians, participation carries risks and opportunities. On one hand, attending the conference gives them a platform to voice grievances, demand recognition, and gain international support. On the other hand, skeptics fear it could lead to vague promises without tangible change on the ground, which could further erode trust in diplomacy. For Israelis, attendance may be politically costly given domestic divisions. Yet engagement could also demonstrate willingness to at least hear proposals which could ease international criticism. The careful choreography of participation, speeches, and outcomes will therefore be crucial in determining the conference's impact. Looking at the broader picture, the France-Saudi initiative reflects the intersection of three forces. First, a recognition that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains central to Middle Eastern instability, despite efforts to sideline it. Second, the emergence of new regional dynamics, where Arab states like Saudi Arabia are both pursuing normalization with Israel and reaffirming Palestinian statehood. Third, the effort by global powers like France to reclaim a role in shaping peace beyond the dominance of Washington. These forces converge in the symbolism of a joint conference that attempts to marry Arab legitimacy with Western influence. At its heart, the two-state solution remains both simple and immensely complex. The vision is clear: Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace with secure borders and mutual recognition. The complexity lies in the decades of mistrust, bloodshed, and entrenched narratives that make compromise so difficult. France and Saudi Arabia are essentially saying the vision cannot be abandoned, and that without reviving it, the alternative will be perpetual conflict, instability, and humanitarian crises. The conference also serves as a reminder of how diplomacy is as much about performance and symbolism as about substance. The staging of the event, the speeches delivered, the images broadcast, all contribute to shaping perceptions and narratives. Even if immediate breakthroughs are unlikely, the very act of convening can alter the diplomatic landscape, forcing actors to respond, recalibrate, and reconsider their positions. France and Saudi Arabia are betting that this performance, if designed carefully, can generate enough momentum to break through the inertia of the current stalemate. In this sense, the conference functions like a stage production where each actor's role, dialogue, and gestures matter. The hosts set the stage, the international community provides supporting characters, and Israel and the Palestinians are thrust into the spotlight, whether they wish to be or not. The audience is both domestic populations and the world at large, watching closely to see if there will be a new chapter or merely a repeat of old scripts.